When you're adding integers, sometimes drawing a picture can become, at a certain point, very inefficient. So we've got to come up with another way to do this. So another way I'm going to show you how to add integers is using absolute value. Like just looking at the numbers themselves, like ignoring the signs and just dealing with the numbers themselves, and then kind of bringing the sign in at the end. So if you're adding integers that have the same sign, like you have a positive number plus a positive number, of course your answer is going to be positive. And if you have a negative number plus a negative number, of course your answer is going to be negative because the signs match. So if you're adding integers with the same sign, just add up whatever the numbers are. It says the absolute value of the integers, like ignoring any signs, just add the numbers. And then the sum, your answer, will have the same sign as the integers being added, like I said here. So two positives will make a positive, two negatives will make a negative. But here's where this really helps. To add two integers with different signs, it says you subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater one. So ignore the signs. They're going to have different signs. Ignore the signs. Subtract the two numbers, and your answer will have the same sign as the integer with the greater absolute value. In other words, the integer that is farther from 0. Whichever integer of the two you're adding, whichever one is farthest from 0 gets to be like the winner. So if the negative number is farther from 0, your answer is going to be negative. If the positive number is farther from 0, your answer is going to be positive. Okay, so that's like they get to be the winner, whichever one has the largest distance from 0. So just for a couple examples, if we're adding a negative number to a negative number, the answer is only going to be negative. If you're at -10 and you add -7, you're adding even more negatives, your answer is going to be -17 because they're both negative. So the answer is going to be negative. But on these next two examples, this is where you have mismatched signs. So we have a negative number and a positive number. So the first thing we want to do is figure out which one is farther from 0. Which one has the larger absolute value, -3 or 5? Well, the absolute value of -3 is 3. The absolute value of 5 is 5. So 5 is the winner. This guy is farther from 0. And you notice he's positive, so that tells me my answer is going to be positive. So I already know my answer is going to be positive. And it says subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater one. So just look at these as a 3 and a 5. What's the difference between 3 and 5? It's 2. So my answer is going to be positive 2. But it is positive because that guy right there, he wins. So he gets to decide the sign on the final answer. So you actually subtract. I know that seems strange, but you subtract and keep the sign of the one farther from 0. So let's consider that one here. We see that they're mismatched signs. So we're going to subtract them. The difference between 8 and 4, that difference is 4. But which one is farther from 0? The -8. And so that means our answer is going to be negative because that guy wins. He's farther from 0. So I already know my answer is negative. The difference between 4 and 8 is 4. So my answer for that one would be -4. So that's a way to do it without having to actually draw a picture. If that's not sitting right with you, why don't you consider what those would look like using one of the pictures, either the chip model or the number line model, and see if you can kind of convince yourself of why the answer is positive and why it's negative. But this is supposed to end up being like a quicker way to do the problem than having to draw a picture.